So good morning and welcome to our first of our full week of careers presentations. So we're being joined today by Rio Godfrey, who's our higher degree apprenticeship champion from NEACO, and she is going to be delivering a really great session for you guys around boosting your apprenticeship search. You can also use the chat function today if you have any questions as you go, and Rio will be able to answer those questions at the end. And we will be recording this presentation and we'll be sharing this on our website a little bit later on in the week. So I will hand you over to Rio. Thank you.
Perfect, thank you. Yeah, so today I'm going to be talking about how to boost your apprenticeship search. So if you're interested in doing an apprenticeship but you're struggling to either find a vacancy, or you're finding some vacancies but you're finding that you're not being invited to interview, or if you're being invited to interview but you're not getting the job, we're going to look at kind of all of that and how you can boost your search and boost your application. So before we start, if I could just get you all to take a brief look at our data protection notice, and this is going to give you some information about how we use and store your data. Okay, so as I said, what we're going to cover today is we'll look at a quick apprenticeship recap, an overview of kind of what's involved in the process, how to find a vacancy, boosting your application, and we'll also look at some interview tips. We'll be taking a look at the speculative approach, so reaching out to employers and asking for apprenticeship opportunities, and then we'll also be talking a little bit about having a plan B and why that's so important. So to recap then, I'm sure if you're listening to this, then you kind of have an understanding of the apprenticeship pathway as it is, but I thought I would just kind of start by recapping some of those key features. So it's a work-based pathway to gaining a qualification, and it combines a full-time job with studying. Now, the best way to look at an apprenticeship is as a triangle, and this is also really useful when thinking about who you can reach out to find an apprenticeship. So you would have you, the apprentice, and then you've got the employer, so that's who your employment contract would be with, and they are going to pay you and provide all of your on-the-job training. And then you've got the training provider, and they are going to be teaching you the theory behind the qualification, so that could be a college or a university. Your time is spent 80% working and 20% studying. Now, importantly, there's no kind of one deadline for apprenticeships, so applications open throughout the year, and to apply you'll need to meet academic entry criteria and a job specification too. So there's lots of reasons that apprenticeships are a good option. Earn while you learn, so the fact that you'll be able to have a salary coming in at the same time as gaining a qualification. No student loans, that's quite a nice one. All of your tuition fees will be paid for. And then also the opportunity to put theory into practice. So everything you're learning with your training provider, you can immediately input that into the workplace, which is quite a nice benefit. So I thought I would recap on the different apprenticeship levels, and that kind of will help you with when you're searching to make sure that you're applying for the right level apprenticeship for you. So we've got intermediate apprenticeships, and these are equivalent to a level 2 qualification, 5 GCSEs. You've got advanced apprenticeships, which are a level 3 apprenticeship that are equivalent to 2 A-levels or a level 3 diploma. Then you've got your higher apprenticeships. So this could include a level 4 or a level 5, and that's equivalent to a higher national certificate or a higher national diploma, or those two together equal to a foundation degree. And then you've got degree apprenticeships, which, as the name suggests, that's a level 6, and that's a bachelor's degree. So what sort of steps could you see in the process? Some of you may have come across these steps already and have started, so it's just a kind of recap really. So research is a huge part of the apprenticeship process. You'll need to obviously research whether the apprenticeship route is right for you, but then also research the employers and the companies and the different vacancies as well. So that's a big part. The sectors, so having an awareness of what different opportunities there are that you can do an apprenticeship in. Work experience, so apprenticeships are a job, so the more work experience you have, then the stronger your application, and that includes as well a strong CV and covering letter. Awareness of the apprenticeship websites, which we are going to touch on in more detail, but as I said, there's no kind of one place to find vacancies, so it's making sure that you're checking all the kind of key places. and being prepared for the application process. So there's going to be either an application form or a CV stage, then an interview stage. So it's just kind of an awareness of what's needed for those stages. And then signing up for an account for accounts and alerts is a really important part of the process as well. So we're going to touch on then finding an apprenticeship vacancy. I know this is kind of one of the areas where people struggle the most in kind of finding the right apprenticeship for them. So I just wanted to go through really kind of a checklist of where you can look and where you're going to be able to find those vacancies. So I would use this page as a checklist of websites. This isn't a definitive list, so there's other places you can look, but these are some really good ones to make sure that you've checked. So the first is the Government Find an Apprenticeship webpage. We are going to touch on that in a bit more detail, just because that's quite a large one where you're going to find quite a few vacancies. UCAS has some really good apprenticeship information pages, but they actually also have a vacancy page. So make sure you're looking at the UCAS apprenticeship vacancies. AmazingApprenticeships.com. Now this is a really good one because they have something called a vacancy snapshot, and it shows you a huge list of companies that are currently employing apprentices, so higher and degree apprenticeships in particular. They've got a huge range of kind of employers that they feature on their website, so definitely take a look at Amazing Apprenticeships. Indeed is on here because it's just a reminder that obviously apprenticeships are a job, so you can look at those kind of typical recruitment websites. The Institute for Apprenticeships, I've put this one on here because it's quite a nice place to have a look at the different roles that are available and the apprenticeships that exist. Employers' websites. So employers don't have to advertise on the Government Find an Apprenticeship webpage. They might have their own careers pages. So if you're interested in a certain career or sector, a good thing to do would be to sit down and write a list of some of the key employers in that area or in that sector, and then visit each of their careers pages and see what information they have on there, because they might not have advertised on the government webpage. And then finally, training provider websites. So if you have a look at colleges or universities that support apprenticeships, if you go onto their apprenticeship page, sometimes they advertise vacancies there that the employers that they work with have. So hopefully that gives you kind of a good starting point. Some of these you may have used already, some of them you might not have thought to look at. So I just wanted to include those on there as a little kind of starting point checklist for you. So I did say that we'd look at the Find an Apprenticeship website in a bit more detail, because sometimes when speaking to students, this is an area that can kind of limit you really. So I sometimes get people say, oh, I can't find any apprenticeships. And actually, it really comes down to what they're putting in this filter section. So when you go on to the Find an Apprenticeship webpage, this is the screen that you're shown to start with. And there's an option for keywords, your location, the radius that you want to look in, and then the levels. So my first kind of top tip to think about if you are using this website is really think about what you're putting into the keywords, because it's a really sensitive website. So if you put a very specific keyword in there, it's going to limit what it shows you. So it's going to kind of not show you things that are more broadly related to the area you're looking in. So I would almost just leave that one completely blank and just scroll through and scan the vacancies that way, because otherwise it can kind of limit what it shows you. Location is really important, and if you're struggling to find an apprenticeship close to you, then it may mean that you need to look quite a bit further away. So sometimes it's really hard to visualize. If you put 10 miles in the location, then 10 miles can sound like quite far away, but actually, if you look into the commute, if you look at the buses and the trains and figure out what those miles actually mean in terms of commuting time, and think about whether that's think about the balance. Is an apprenticeship, and is that an apprenticeship worth it for travelling? So I've put a couple of websites on here that might be useful to help you start to think about kind of, could you stretch that a little bit further, and could you look at commuting? So Google Maps, it sounds really obvious, but actually it's really useful and linking up how long it takes to walk, how long it takes to drive, and then it also shows you kind of the buses and trains as well. And then a website that I use quite often because I'm terrible with geography, so I need some help sometimes, is the Rome to Rio website, and that's really good. Again, you put your starting point and your end point, and it will show you all the different travel options. So maybe think about expanding that search and a slightly longer commute it might be worth it for you. And then also to maybe consider, is relocation an option? And obviously that is a big decision, but you may find that there is an apprenticeship that for you is worth it. And it's also worth talking to the employer because they might be able to help support with relocation. Finally, just on this website, you can filter by levels. So if you go back to kind of those levels that I showed you earlier, have a think about whether you're applying for the right level for you. You might be thinking, oh, okay, I'm going to apply for an advanced apprenticeship, but actually have a look at the entry criteria for those higher and degree apprenticeships. Are you limiting yourself? Could you potentially look at those higher and degree apprenticeships as well? Okay, so the next thing I'm going to talk about is the speculative approach, and this is reaching out to employers or businesses to find out if they can offer you an apprenticeship. So if you can't see that they're advertising a vacancy, but you really like the sound of their business and you would really like to work there, then the speculative approach could be a good option. So it's a good way to find opportunities that aren't being advertised online. Some employers may not have even considered taking on an apprentice before, so you could be kind of nudging them to think about whether they can support somebody doing an apprenticeship. You can find out about opportunities before they come available. So they might be saying, you know, in the next month or two, we're going to be advertising, and you're going to get that information kind of ahead of the game there. And also, employers are going to remember you, and they're going to really appreciate you were proactive and confident enough to reach out to them. So if you do end up applying in the future, it might be something that kind of sticks in their mind and then works in your favour. So if you are reaching out to employers and businesses, what's some of the key things to think about and consider? Really, my biggest top tip with this is be open to all opportunities. So you may reach out to an employer and they might not be able to just kind of offer you an apprenticeship straight away. But what you can do is ask instead for work experience. And work experience is going to let you kind of get your foot in the door. You're going to be able to start building up a relationship with that employer. And then either further down the line, an apprenticeship might be an option, or if not, you're still going to have that really good work experience to boost your CV. So definitely be open, you know, don't just think, okay, they can't offer me an apprenticeship, that's it. So be open is my first top tip. Now this will be a common theme throughout this in terms of your CV, your cover letter, every part really. Research the company, make the employer see that it's them you're specifically interested in, not just any old job. And let the employer see why you are a good candidate for them. So you want them to offer you something, so you need to tell them what you're going to offer them and what skills and attributes you have that means they should, you know, consider that and think about employing you. So I found this really good example online, so I just wanted to kind of show you a few features that kind of make it a really good speculative letter. So it's essentially a cover letter, but you're also kind of outright asking for that opportunity. So what I really liked about this one is that they've started off straight away explaining exactly why they're contacting the employer and what role they're looking for. So I really liked that to kind of get straight to the point. They've shown here that they've really researched the company and they've researched the business and what makes that business them really. And then again, they've explained those kind of relevant skills as well. So some kind of final things to think about if you are looking at the speculative approach. Don't be afraid to make a phone call. So employers will get a lot of emails, they'll get a lot of letters. Sometimes an employer will really appreciate if you've taken the time to kind of make a call. And I know not everybody likes making those phone calls, but if you can, then it can really help kind of boost you know, the perspective of how the employer sees you if you've taken the time to make a phone call. Really important, if you can, try and get the name of somebody specific in that business. So if you can't, it's fine to just kind of put to whom it may concern. But if you can get the name of somebody within that business, then that's going to help with directing your email or your letter. Another one that I was actually speaking to a colleague about, because we've seen this happen a lot recently. Think about using social media. So obviously LinkedIn is a really good option, but my colleague that I was speaking to about, we realised that actually on our kind of, we live in villages, And on our village forums, there are more and more people now asking on the village forums, you know, is anybody hiring apprentices at the moment? Is anybody taking on kind of work experience? So definitely think about how you could utilise social media. And this common phrase that you've probably heard before is, it's not what you know, it's who you know. And really think about who you know. So you may think, oh, okay, no one in my family has a business that could hire me. But think about that kind of extension. So, you know, does your mum have a friend who has a cousin who can ask? So really kind of think about expanding that network of who you could speak to and who you could ask someone to speak to someone on your behalf. Okay, so that is the speculative approach. So we are going to look at now, if you've got a vacancy, how you can really boost your application and make sure that you're getting invited to interview. So getting to that interview stage is really important. My top tip here is that hopefully you'll get lots of information from this presentation, but there are so many online resources that are there to kind of help structure your application form and to help you submit the best application that you can. And one of my all-time favourites, because it just gives you so much support and help, is the government's National Apprenticeship Service How to Write a Winning Apprenticeship Application document. So I have linked it. So this picture here where it says don't dream it, do it, is actually a hyperlink that will take you through to the document. And it's a really detailed document about how best to fill out your application. So it breaks down every step of the application form and gives you top tips on how to answer those questions, of key information to include, and it gives you ideas of kind of why they're asking that question and what they want to see in your answer. So I really cannot recommend this document enough. If you are completing an application form on the government website, do download this. It's a PDF, and just have a read through, even if you kind of just skip to the parts that are most relevant to you. But yeah, it's really useful. So the first thing I wanted to say is, you know, these things are out there, so make sure you're using them. We also have a Take Your Place Apprenticeship podcast series, and episode 3 of the podcast series is all about submitting a good application form and preparing for interviews. So in line with kind of thinking about those online resources, do make sure you're looking at our apprenticeship podcast series as well. So if you are finding vacancies but then realising that you're not getting invited to interview, it's important to kind of take a step back and have a look at your CV and your application form and what is on there, and kind of look at it with fresh eyes. So doing that CV audit is really important. So I just wanted to kind of go through some of those must-haves on your CV and then those things to avoid on your CV as well. So make sure, obviously, that your name and contact details are on there. As I said earlier, research the company thoroughly and make sure you're showing evidence of skills and traits that match that job role. So you need to tailor your CV to that job role and make sure that you're picking out skills and qualities on your CV that directly align to that job role, so that when an employer is reading your CV, they can kind of scan through them and pick out those key parts. You can include your interests and hobbies, but make sure again that they're relevant, and your education and qualifications are really important as well, because obviously with an apprenticeship there's those academic entry criteria as well. A top tip that sometimes people don't think about is to use a sensible email address. A friend of mine had a very unprofessional email address, and for years she was applying for jobs with it, and then realised that maybe she should make it a bit more professional. So do make sure that you've got a really sensible email address, and as silly as it sounds, make sure you're checking your emails regularly, and that includes your junk folder, because quite a lot of the time emails might go into there. So make sure that it's impactful, make sure that you're not going over 2 pages. So that's really important. Employers don't have a lot of time to read through pages and pages of documents. So 2 pages at absolute most. And then the details are really important. So spell check and proofreading. You know, you can get a friend or family member to proofread it for you with those kind of fresh eyes, because those sorts of things will stand out to the employers. Don't make it too cluttered. So I said 2 pages, that doesn't mean make it teeny tiny text and squeeze loads onto those 2 pages. You want it to be something that your employer is going to sit down and enjoy reading. And so if you're finding that actually you've checked all of those things you've got a very professional CV, you've got a good email address, you've included all the key information, but you're kind of wanting something to help boost with your skills and showing the evidence of how you are right for that job role, then there's lots of things you could consider doing to boost your CV and application form, and it's not too late to do any of these. So work experience is a huge one. It's really vital. I'm sure you've spoken about it lots. I'm sure you've kind of reached out to try and find work experience. Lots of companies are now offering online work experience, so especially now as we come to the summer and you've got a bit more free time, see if you can get onto some of the online work experience opportunities. Volunteering is always good, especially if you can do some volunteering that's going to give you some really good transferable employability skills. And I wanted to include a couple that would be useful because of coronavirus and kind of the more virtual world that we're living in. So online seminars and webinars, you can sign up to tons of free webinars online at the moment. So you could do that in your kind of chosen area, and that will look really good on your CV. Equally, there's things like virtual museum tours that you can start doing as well, if that's relevant to the area that you want to go in. There's lots of virtual experiences that you could consider. And then if you can't find any of those, you can sign up to kind of subscriptions to journal articles or online magazines, and you can evidence how you've kind of read that relevant material in your CV and application form. That's something quite nice to include. So we've kind of looked at how to find a vacancy, we've reached out to employers, you've done a full audit of your CV and your application form, and the really good news is that you've been invited to interview. Now, I could probably talk for about a full other hour on how to prepare for an interview, and there, as I said, we do have our podcast series on interview preparation, so I really just wanted to kind of give you an overview of top tips to think about before your interview. So first of all, preparation is really key here. So just like with your CV and application form, you need to go through the job description and look at those key skills that they're looking for, and then sit down and list kind of examples of when you've shown those key skills, so that you're prepared for any questions that they have. You can automatically think, right, I've got an example for that, and you'll feel confident. Lots of times they'll ask kind of what your key strengths are, and some people really struggle to talk about what they're good at. So first of all, don't, because that's what the employer wants to know. They want you to sell yourself and talk about your strengths. But if you are struggling, then the best thing to do is ask a friend or a teacher or a family member what they think you're good at, because they'll definitely have something to tell you, but it might be something you hadn't even considered before. So in terms of logistics for your interview, if you can plan your route well in advance, plan your interview outfit well in advance, then on the day you're not going to feel rushed or stressed, and you'll feel calm. So that's a really important top tip. If you are feeling nervous, then absolutely do not worry. It's completely normal to feel nervous before an interview. That's why it's really good to prepare beforehand so you feel confident. Smile, make eye contact with the employer, and one of the things that I always do in interviews, so you can take this with you if you like, is that if you are nervous, then make sure you've got a glass of water, and if you need a second to kind of compose yourself before answering a question, you can take a nice big sip of water, deep breath, and then you can say your answer, and that just kind of helps to calm your nerves and help you think about the answer to the question. And when you are thinking about the answer to the question, try and really structure all of your answers. So I'm not sure if you've come across before the STAR technique, but basically think about the situation, the task, the action, and what was the outcome. So always kind of using examples to back up your interview answers. So if all of that fails and you are still struggling, then that's why it's really important to always have a plan B. I absolutely love apprenticeships. I think they offer a huge amount. Their only downside is that there aren't as many vacancies as I would like there to be. And so unfortunately, if you are considering the apprenticeship route, it's really important that you've thought about what your other options could be if that route doesn't work out. So I just wanted to briefly kind of mention some of your other options. So traineeships, these can be a good option if you've got absolutely no work experience, and they give you that kind of work placement experience, and then hopefully that would then continue on and you can then have a stronger CV and cover letter ready for an apprenticeship. So there is still the opportunity to go to university. Clearing is coming up soon, so you could consider university or consider university for next year and take a gap year. So the only thing I'll say with a gap year, if you are considering it, then make it worthwhile. So have a real kind of end goal of what you want to achieve from a gap year. Make sure that it's well planned, well structured, and if you do really want to go down the apprenticeship route, then make sure everything you're doing in your gap year is going to contribute towards successfully gaining an apprenticeship. So work, you could go straight into work, and then that could give you some kind of employability skills, and then you could consider, you know, either changing that role into an apprenticeship in the future, or then moving on to an apprenticeship once you've gained some experience, or you can consider further education. So they're just some of the kind of options if the apprenticeship route isn't quite working out at the moment. So what do I recommend that you do next? I am a massive fan of lists, so I'm going to talk to you about kind of what you can do to create kind of checklists and how you can kind of move on from this point. But before I do that, I just thought it was really important to say that apprenticeships are all about kind of determination and persevering. They are a kind of long-winded application pathway, so there's a lot that's involved, so it's totally fine, you know, if you're not finding them at the moment. There's lots of things you can do to search and to boost your application, so just keep positive and keep going. It's kind of a message I really wanted to include in this. So to my lists, checklists are kind of going to give you a good place to kind of work through, so you're kind of prepared for you know what you're up to next. So make sure that you've got a list of all of those useful apprenticeship websites. Obviously I gave a few to you earlier, but I would you know, add a few more to that list, and have that list and just regularly be checking that you're going through the list and having a look at the vacancies on those websites. Importantly, set up accounts and alerts. So all of those websites I mentioned, you can sign up for an account, and what that means is that when new vacancies are advertised, you'll be sent an alert by email. So that's quite an important kind of thing to add to your to-do list. If you are going to consider the speculative approach, then make sure that you're going to spend some time to sit down and write a full list of all the different employers that you can contact, and then you can go through and check them off once you have contacted them as well. Complete a CV audit. So that's what I mentioned earlier in terms of going through your CV and checking that key information's on there, that you're proofreading it, that you're spell checking it, and that it's presenting a really good version of yourself. And then finally, maybe consider a kind of clear plan B, so you're not stressed, so that you know if the apprenticeship route doesn't work out, you know what you can do as an alternative. And so I just wanted to signpost you before we finish to our Take Your Place website. We've got some really good resources on there. Our Take Your Apprenticeship podcast series will hopefully be really useful to you. And then again, just kind of a recap of some of those apprenticeship websites, as well as my email address. So if you are really struggling, then you can get in touch with me as well. So I will stop talking at you, and then I'll stop sharing my screen, and then thank you for listening, and I'll see if you've got any questions.
Thank you so much, Rio. So I just wanted to, you know, just go through the chat. There's a couple of questions in there for you, Rio. First one says, can you apply for an apprenticeship at any age?
So for the higher and degree apprenticeships, let me start again. Basically, you have to be over 16, and for those higher and degree apprenticeships, it's usually over 18, but there's no upper age limit for an apprenticeship. So that's really important to consider as well, because you're going to be competing not only against people that you went to school or college with, but also people that are out in the workforce. So that's why it's good to have a really strong application, because there is no upper age limit.
Thanks, that's really good advice. Hannah has put, with this speculative approach, what kind of things should you mention when you call a company? So, you know, do you mention that you are, you know, a school college leaver? What kind of things would you suggest that people say on that first phone call, Rio?
Yeah, so obviously everybody is quite busy. So if you are making a phone call, plan what you're going to say beforehand. So that's a really good question, because it's really good to kind of plan out exactly what you're going to say. You want to start by introducing yourself and just giving a really brief overview of who you are and at what stage you're at. So if you are a college leaver, then you can start by saying that and mention maybe some of the qualifications that you have that are relevant to that business. So in any conversation, you want to make sure that you're only mentioning things that are relevant, that you're coming across professional, and that you're kind of getting to the point of exactly why you're calling, and what you can offer the business as well. Does that answer your question?
Yes, I can see Hannah's typing at the moment, so thank you for that. Yeah, that's great. Thank you very much. So with regards to the sort of speculative approach, would you, you know, sort of contact lots of companies at the same time, or would you sort of, you know, sort of target certain things? What would be your advice around that, Rio?
So I'd say definitely write a list of your top employers that you want to contact. So have that kind of short list of the key ones that you'd absolutely love to work for and you really want to work for. I think that you can never contact too many employers, so you know, reach out to as many as you can. But I think the key thing there is, if you are reaching out to multiple employers, it's really important that you're organised and you're keeping a list of who you've contacted, what their email address and name are, and what they've said, what conversations you've had, because you don't want to get into a situation where you're having a conversation with an employer but it turns out you're thinking of a completely different employer, because that would just come across a bit unprofessional. So absolutely try and contact as many as you can, have your kind of short list, but always keep a record of who you're contacting and what conversations you've had with them, because yeah, you don't want to come across unprofessional and get them all a bit mixed up.
Thank you. No, that's really good advice. In a situation where they might not be able to offer an apprenticeship straight away, you mentioned being able to ask for things like work experience, or maybe even just a chance to go in and shadow somebody for a day to get some further information. But if you were successful in gaining something like that, is there anything that you can do to help an employer to maybe convert it to an apprenticeship?
Yeah, so I think if you can get your foot in the door, then you're going to be able to show the employer, you know, in real life, that why you're a good candidate. So certainly if you do get that opportunity, make sure you really are committing to doing a good job at whatever it is they've brought you in to do. I think some employers maybe haven't considered apprenticeships because they don't necessarily know that process of how they would support an apprenticeship. So if you're kind of getting a sort of vibe from the employers that that's why they haven't considered apprenticeships, then there is a lot of support for employers. So first of all, training providers, so colleges and universities offer a huge range of support to employers on how to support an apprentice, and also there's some government organisations as well. So Suffolk Apprenticeships are really good at reaching out and supporting employers through that process. So if you're finding that that's kind of why they haven't had apprentices in the past, then they can definitely contact those training providers or those government organisations such as Suffolk Apprenticeships to help support them through that process of taking on an apprentice.
Yeah, that's really useful, Rio, because you do sometimes find that, you know, even people are able to convert, you know, what they do as a part-time job into something, you know, sort of more long-term for the future. Or it might be that you've actually, you know, had a successful work experience placement somewhere before, and they've said that, you know, at the end of that they'd be willing to maybe help you out in the future. So that's a really good chance to kind of reach out initially, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. And it shows the employer that you are genuinely interested as well, because you don't want an employer to say, oh, I can't offer you an apprenticeship, and then you go, okay, well, that's it then, I don't want anything. You know, it's showing willing and it's showing interest in that area. So that's always going to make you look good to an employer, definitely.
Okay, that's fantastic. Has anybody else got any last minute questions for Rio? I think, you know, the session itself, Rio, has been fantastic. It covers such a wealth of information that I think will be exceptionally useful for our students. I have also popped in a lot of the information with regards to the links and things that you've mentioned, but we will also share your presentation from today as well, and we're going to pop that all on our main website so that you've got this as a resource as well. So I can't see any other questions at the moment, Rio, but thank you for sharing your contact details today as well. And like I said, Rio and the NEACO team, they have got that fantastic website, Take Your Place, and are available to support any of our students. So thanks again for your time, Rio. We really do appreciate it.
Thanks very much for having me in.